I think we need to have a conversation about this for the next 10, 20 minutes. The stock in relationship to its valuation. Okay. So when the stock ran to 11 from $7, Arnie reduced his position from 80 to 50. And outside of some idiots that thought that was a bad move, I think all of us were like, yeah, if you run up 40% in 2 days, you should probably reduce an 80% position down to a mere 50% because that's just insane. He did not expect it was going to run up to 15. None of us expected it was going to run up to 15 and AI was going to be mania. And now we're kind of left with this question, which is, do you buy the stock now? Now, the answer is very simple. If it's 2030 play, what's the difference between 11, 12, 14, 7? It's really not, doesn't matter if we're thinking it's a $250, $150 company. However, I think it is important to kind of address this issue of, do you feel there is a retracement coming because the AI mania is so crazy, or do you think AI Pecan validated enough of the AI mania to the point where the valuation theoretically could be undervalued even if the growth is only 18 or 20% this year? Or do you feel the growth has to go back to 25, 30% in order to justify a $30 billion valuation with a company barely doing $2 billion in revenue? Arnie, let's start with you and then we'll move to Dom.
Look, the principle I try to follow in terms of allocation is always try to have a position that makes me happy regardless of how the stock can move in the next future. Meaning, if I'm positioned correctly, I will be happy if the stock drops 50% or if the stock goes up 50%. That to me is a criteria I like to feel, okay, I have the right amount invested in this company. The reason why I trimmed, we shared it last week, it was because obviously the move up was based on pure interest on AI stocks and not for merits on Palantir alone. We could see that from NVIDIA, C3AI, but generally tech skyrocketing, moved by hype on AI. But in the last week, something really different changed. To me, one of the most important things that happened in these last weeks was not AAP, was not the stock rising, but Ukraine saying, we are so happy with what you are doing that we are going to use Palantir as the key partner for our reconstruction. Are there any other company out there saying something similar? Not to my knowledge. And this implicitly validates a huge bet Palantir was making. Basically, Palantir invested 1 year to get this. And to me, this is like, okay, this is one announcement that potentially changes everything, as a good YouTuber would say. Why? Because so far we have been complaining that, hey, we're working for free. Now it's like, okay, once the war will end and the Palantir have a clear incentive now to finish this thing, a big value can be unlocked in terms of monetization. Probably it will be BlackRock organizing all the reconstruction funding and so on. So Palantir will get paid. Then AAP is the validation that the company is capturing the opportunity they have in front of them, which is what we were scared last year, as we mentioned before. So in terms of execution, I'm very happy. And even if I was already very confident, it's like before I was 99% confident, now is I'm 99.9% confident. This means that if the company is the right one, now it is only a matter of stock price. At the right price, I would be extremely happy to go incredibly hard. In a situation like now, where the multiple exploded, we are trading at around 12, 13x EV sales. The price is not expensive, is clearly not cheap. And now it comes really to the question, okay, what the growth will be. I don't like the idea of trying to predict the stock price. I like to react based on the opportunity we are facing. And right now, I see the price more in the fair zone rather than saying it is undervalued or it is overvalued. It is there, which on my part means, okay, I can do nothing. I let the business compound. If something stupid happens on both directions, maybe I think of acting. So far, I can just wait. But I'll tell you, given the recent developments, I'm actually really hoping some new bear caves arrive, hopefully with some grounded theory or thesis on why the stock could crash, and not on the usual eaten 100 times things that we have been discussing. Like, I think every one of us is already tired of talking about SPACs, Palantir being a consultancy, but that actually tells you how early we are. Like, the compounded knowledge that we are building here inside the community is literally 6 months ahead of the market. So imagine, is what Palantir sees, we develop things before, market accepts them. Internally, I have this feeling we make such a good conversation about the critical points that scare us as investors, because as investors, we have skin in the game. We don't write a report hoping the stock goes down by not putting our money on it. We are deep scared. And when you're scared, you are on skin in the game. You take care of not missing the crucial things. So to sum up very quickly, we have a validation that what was a price only moved by hype on AI, I would say right now it is deserved. So even if technically trimming a position was a bad thing, I would say I'm happy I did it, because having the mental calmness to now say, okay, the stock goes at 8, I'm happy. The stock goes at 20, I'm happy. To me, is worth much more than the direct monetary gain.
Okay. Dom, stocks overvalued, undervalued. What do you think?
Compared to what, right? So that's what I'm first say is compared to what? Because your time horizon is going to determine if it's undervalued, overvalued. If I look at the price to sales ratio, it hasn't been this high since April 19th of 2022, when the stock was $8.58. So we're now at 14 something, 14.41, and we're now 2 quarters profitable, and still no debt, with tons of cash, right? So I think it's a good debate, because I struggle with this too.
I think all of us are struggling with it as investors, right?
And I think the struggle is more or less not that do I think this is going to be a multi-bagger and I'm going to already the amount of money I've invested will yield fruit, meaningful fruit in the years to come. But do I think there are possibilities of irrationality in the environment that we're in the stock market? And the answer to that is, in my opinion, personal opinion, I say yes. I say that we are in unprecedented waters for the last, 3 years. We've not been through a pandemic in a very long time. We've seen inflation. We've seen all these crazy things that we have going on in the world. And so do I think that the market can be as irrational as possible longer than you can be solvent? The answer is yes. So that's why when NVIDIA went to $4.30 a share, I knew it was going to go back down, but I also didn't want to just deal with the hassle of selling and then trying to get back in. And then really at the end of the day, when you look at it, how much extra shares did I really get, right? If I wanted to learn options, maybe I could do calls or something to make up more of a position. But at the end of the day, to Arnie's point, I just think that, okay, if it goes back to 10, I already have cash on the side and I'm ready to load up. So I think it's undervalued to the long-term play. To the DCF model now, if anyone looks at it, it's overvalued. But I'm holding this for many, 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 many years. So for me, I could easily see myself adding more, but I have a feeling at an 83 RSI, knowing the little I know about technicals, we're going to see a retracement eventually.
Matthew Money, is the stock overvalued or undervalued?
Yeah, I mean, I'd take the same sentiment as Dom. Really depends on what your time horizon is, right? If you're looking at, the next 10 to 20 years, it's going to be a very different business than what we're looking at today. And so the price to earnings in, if you're looking at, a 28 or 20, $30 billion company today, it'll seem extremely cheap in 10 to 20 years, I feel. And I'm very confident about that. But if you're looking at what it's selling for today, just like what people were probably saying about Google right now, right? There's a big macroeconomic environment that we've kind of been on this 25, 30% run in a lot of stocks, and very fortunate that we've seen a little bit better of an environment for some of these very small, unprofitable organizations. Now Palantir is not really in that, so they're coupling the fact that it's profitable, not having to necessarily go to any sort of marketer or any person to issue debt in order to get financing, so they don't have to necessarily worry about that. I'm sure that that's been a plus on the stock, other than the normal macroeconomic 30% that we've kind of seen over the past 6 months, and then coupling that with the fact that the interest rate thing is going to kick over, right? And I think we're at the end of the tunnel, and probably about to see the light, rather than continuing to have massive increases, right? I don't think we're going to go from 5% interest rates to 10. Would we stop out at 5.25%, 5.5%? Probably, but that's another 5 to 10% increase in the rates, right? Not a 100% increase in the rates from where they are today. So I think that there's a bunch of different things to kind of understand why the stock is up over 100% in the last 6 months. But that being said, I think for anybody that's new, that's joining, and I've mostly speaking to you guys, I feel like it's gotten a lot of press in recent times. I would say, really think about why you're in it. Think about the perspective that you're looking at. Are you looking short term? Are you looking long term? Short term, sell some covered calls, man. If you don't know how to write them, figure it out. Don't get greedy. You have to think. If I know some folks that honestly it's grown to over 10 or 20% of their portfolio. I talk to them on a pretty regular basis, and that freaks them out. They have 1,000 shares and they're like, this is a huge part of my portfolio. That's scary to somebody. I think it's like close to 15% of their portfolio. They say, I'm trimming some of it. And I'm like, go for it, man. Put it in the S&P 500, something that makes you feel slightly better at night, and not to say that as their portfolio grows, they can't dollar cost average into Palantir, but it's all about what makes people sleep well at night. It's personal finance. But to me, it's something I've been writing covered calls. I've been running $20, $21, $22 covered calls, because I don't want to get rid of the golden goose. If I really wanted it, I'd be writing it closer to the money, $15, $16. And, I just feel like within a day that could get blown through, and I'm not trying to play role and catch up. I'd rather just take a couple percent here, a couple percent there, take some money off the table. But if for somebody that's looking to also enter a long-term position, they think it is short-term overvalued here, I understand that. There's a lot of folks that know about cash secured puts. Chris will tell you about them. I'm doing them on SLG. If you honestly think that the price is overvalued, or you just want to put some cash to work, you could do that, right? You could say, I'll buy them at 10, but not $1 more than that. And if it doesn't get to 10, hey, you made a couple bucks here and there, and there's no problem with that, waiting for a pullback, and if it doesn't get there, then, maybe it wasn't meant to be. But like Dom said, man, it's really, I could go off on a tangent for 6 hours talking about, what you could do in any sort of situation. And I think that that's why some people don't necessarily relate, is because we'll kind of throw out all the possibilities, but it's really personal finance. And that's what you need to understand, is what helps you sleep well at night and what helps you get the exposure that you want.
And Matt, to that point, you just made some really good points there and wisdom. And so when we go back to 2021, when everyone was investing in any kind of small cap, and you were just like, things were just stupid. Like Cloudflare was at $220 a share. Like, I don't know why I didn't take some money off the table when it got to the point of that, where we're talking mind-blowing valuations, right? But if I had the conviction in Cloudflare like I do with something else like Palantir and NVIDIA, then that wouldn't be such a big deal. I say that because the stock market is extremely unpredictable. And if anyone thinks otherwise and thinks that they can figure it out long term and predict it and guess more than not and be in and be out, good luck for you, because a lot of people have been burned that way. And so how much is enough? Because if I look back at it, when my gut was saying back in 2020, I don't need these, I was part of a different podcast at the time, and everyone was talking about these. It was all about the 10Xer, get the 10Xer, get the multi-bagger, and everyone's literally like doubling, tripling their money in like 3 months. And it's like, that's not normal. I was still learning in individual investing and enjoying those returns, but not understanding that's not normal, right? If you look at the history of returns. But in my gut, I was like, man, I could probably take some of this and just put it in NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and they're not going anywhere. And I know for sure their business model, their finances will hold up over a decade. Wholeheartedly believe that. But instead, I let the money ride and ride all the momentum, and everyone was, and I'm not talking about Palantir. I'm just talking about all these other small caps, right? Which is okay if that's your risk tolerance and everything else. But I say all of that because if you look at the returns that those 4 stocks had, and people back then were like, oh, their market cap's so big, they can't run up that much. Like, no, it's impossible. 2 trillion, 3 trillion, no, what? No. And now look at it, right? People are going to say the same thing and say, Apple can't become a $6 trillion company or 7 trillion. How do you know? What do you know? Do you know if they're going to come out with a car? Do you know if they're going to come out with something else that changes how we interact with each other? So I say all of that just because don't be so naive to think that you have it all figured out. Be diversified if that's what you want to do. Know your risk tolerance. It's personal finance, and just make sure you do your homework.
I agree. I think that's a great point. I have 2 points just to add to this. I think number one, I've been saying for the past couple of weeks publicly, I think the stock's going to fall back down to 7, 8. I mean, after earnings, I was like, it's probably going to come back down. And my bet was like, look, I need to feel that this hype is validated. I think yesterday's conference proved that there's legit stuff here. Like, this is real. It can grow. The inbound demand that Karp is speaking about is really exciting to hear about, because if that's the case, then sandbagging is going on for Q2 and full year guidance growth. And they might have a quarter. I don't know if it's next quarter, the quarter 8 or 4 quarters later, where they pull in NVIDIA. Where they're like, hey, we're going to get 60% more revenue growth than you guys thought we were going to get. And the whole stock is repriced. The whole narrative shifts. It's not an overvalued company now. Now it's a monopoly on GPUs. And like, you're out. Because if you weren't in NVIDIA in the 300s or 250s, it's going to be hard to get back there.
But
again.
that's exactly the risk of relying too much on the DCFs, because as we mentioned, if like from a purely numerical standpoint, right now, Palantir is not that appealing. It still dilutes a lot. The free cash flow is still compressed. The growth is not so much. But in order to understand if it is truly undervalued, overvalued, or what, the DCF is not enough. The DCF is just a tool, and you need to consider it as such. A tool you try to exploit to have an intuition. But what you are seeing in terms of business, the qualitative things that generate the numbers, those are the most important things. Because, for instance, if you just look at the numbers, you say, okay, this company has no hope of recovering the growth. But by checking all the qualitative stuff we are discussing about, the hints that the acceleration will be there are actually there. And what's nice of having followed the company so closely is that we can trust or not trust Karp. And I would say at this point, Karp has gained my trust. So if he says the demand is there, the clients are talking with other clients, unlocking network effects, that is there. Now, we'll get into numbers immediately. As Matt said, maybe it takes some quarters. But if we made our job diligently, we can wait. If you are just in for the $50, the $20 now, that could be a risk, because maybe you lose the patience just before all the good things start being incorporated into the numbers. Sorry for the interruption.
No, that was good. That was good. That was exactly what I was going to say. So that was great.